Hey there, chum. Thanks for stopping by. We got a group of real swell fellas to thank, and I'd like to do so right now. We'd like to say thank you to Dave Jackson, Dustin Miller, Ryan Yingling, Masked Llama, a.k.a. Poppy the Keaton, Eric Gess, Chris Copleen, Charlie Young, Kobe Moyer, Cody Dawson, Nikolai at Night, and Chris from a novel console. All of these wonderful folks went to patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. For just a couple of buckaroos a month, a couple bones, a couple skin flints, you can get bonus content, such as our schedule in advance, extra episodes, voting privileges, the ability to suggest topics to us, and more. If you want to check it out, mosey on down that street, Jack, to www.patreon.com/pixelprojectradio. It's certainly a good time, and we hope you like what you see. Alright, now it's time for a real swell bout. Let's hear these boys talk about some Cuphead!
Welcome back, everybody, to Pixel Project Radio, the video game and video game discussion style podcast where we talk all about our favorite games and some of yours, too. It's me. I'm a real smart fella. I'm also a real fart smeller. It's your host. It's Rick. It's me. How's it going? Today we are talking about a very fun game, a very intense game, and some might say a very unfair game. But I'm not going to cast judgments too soon. Before we get into all of that, though, I've got to introduce my guest. You've heard him before on this show. You've heard him talk all about the pizza-tastic turtle power. You've heard him talk all about crushing the church in Fire Emblem Three Houses. Once again, we're welcoming Eric Gess back to the show from the Unlockables. Eric, man, how's it going? It's always good to have you on the show.
Rick, thank you so much, man. It's an honor to be on the show once again. Every time it just gets better and better. It never ever loses its luster. When you gave me the list of games that you were going through and we kind of settled on this one, I'm really excited to talk about it. You could even say that this could be a real high class bout.
Hey, there's the jokes. We're gonna get the jokes flowing. That's true. Because, as all of you know, you've read the title. That's why you're here. We're talking about Cuphead. That's right, Cuphead, the very well-known game that came out in, let's see, what do my notes say here? 2017, is that right?
Yeah, I have it as September 2017, specifically on the Xbox, and then to the Switch and PlayStation a few years later.
That is right. But before we get into all of that, I just wanted to ask you about your history with this game. So when did you first hear about Cuphead? Did you get it on day of release? Or are you a relatively new convert to this boss rush sort of game?
No, so I think I kind of found out about it at the same time everybody else did. I believe it was at the E3 presentation in about 2014 that this game was kind of first shown off. And I think myself, like a lot of people that year, it immediately kind of caught all of our attention just because of the unique art style that the game was presented in. I mean, nobody had ever really kind of seen anything like this before. So immediately you're kind of always looking when E3 comes around, or used to come around, rest in peace probably, when you're always looking for something like unique that kind of stands out from the usual kind of AAA stuff that you see and they present to you. And this one definitely stood out for sure. So I marked this as soon as I knew it was going to come out, I wanted to pick it up on day one. And I did pick it up on day one. And so I've kind of played it since 2017, and I actually do have a lot of fond memories. My best friend since kindergarten also picked it up, and back in the day when we were both kind of swinging the bachelor life, we'd always go over to his house and we would just play Cuphead together for I would say probably a lot of sessions, a lot of months. We did a playthrough of the game on regular. We tried to get through the game on expert co-op together, and just really a lot of great memories around this game. And then unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to go back and play the DLC yet, which is something I've really wanted to do because I saw that was coming out. But I have a lot of extensive experience with this game, and I played it as recently as last weekend of time of recording just to prepare for the show.
Oh, nice. Very, very cool. Much like yourself, I was also aware of it leading up to its release. When this released, I was actually working at GameStop at the time. So
Oh,
I heard all about it. I knew all about it. I got a little mini vinyl that was pretty cool. I don't know
that
what
is
happened
cool.
to it. Yeah, it was a neat little trinket that I took from the back rooms of GameStop. I don't know whatever happened to it. But yeah, I played this on PC. If I don't think it was on release, but it was pretty close to when it first came out. And that's where I play it to this day. I've got it on Switch. I actually haven't tried it on Switch. I ended up streaming a little bit of the game on PC, on one of those like once every 6 month streams that I like to do. And so I was like, well, I already started it again on PC. I'll just do it on PC. But it is great on the Switch from what I've heard. I'm sure it's great on Steam Deck as well. Did you play any of this on Steam Deck?
No, I did not, but I'd always, ever since they kind of ported it to Switch, and now that I am the proud owner of a Steam Deck, I would like to try it in that regards. It seems like it would be an ideal game for that, for sure. And like I said, it makes me a little bit nervous anytime anything kind of goes over from the higher echelon of consoles to the Switch, but I'm glad to hear that it holds up pretty well.
Yeah. Everything that I've heard about the Switch port, it seems like it works okay. And I can't imagine it wouldn't. Once we talk about sort of how the game looks and articulates, I think most folks would agree. Speaking of most folks, we've got some community correspondence from our Discord, our community forum channel, and I want to read a couple of them right now. I'll read a couple now, and then I'll read a couple later on. Just as a reminder to folks, if you want to participate in this, or if you just want to come and hang out with a crew of a lot of really cool people, you can join our Discord. Links to that will be in the show notes in the episode description or on our socials. We're going to talk all about those towards the end of the episode, so stay tuned for that, because we're also going to talk about Eric's show and his socials and all that. So please do stay tuned. But for now, let's read a couple of correspondences. In a rare twist of fate, Dave Jackson, our first responder, is not the first responder. Indeed, he's been usurped. His throne has been claimed. A new champion rises from the ashes, from the mist, looking down upon his kingdom. Of course, we're talking about Ryan Yingling from the Listoff podcast. Shout out to Listoff, the formerly defunct and now reborn, greater than ever podcast all about lists. It's a terrific show, and you should listen to it. Here's what he has to say about Cuphead. Cuphead is a certified masterpiece. Can it be punishing? Absolutely. But that in no way detracts from the game being a monumental love letter to 1930s animation and the music of that era. And underneath the beautifully hand-animated and ragtime marvel lies a highly competent shmup, I hate that word, with slick controls and precise gameplay. Cuphead is without a doubt a must-play for anyone who considers themselves a true fan of animated drinkware. 9.1356 out of 11.
Interesting review score.
I tell you what, ever since Ryan came back from his podcasting hiatus, he's not pulling his punches anymore.
Nope, he's back for vengeance.
He's silly mode. He's just feeling he's feeling a little silly. Just a little goofy.
We love Goofy Ryan.
Just a little goofy mood. And one more I'll read before we get into some specifics is, of course, from Dave Jackson from Tales from the Backlog. If you've listened to our show, you're going to love Dave's show, so check it out. He says, the conversation around Cuphead is usually either centered around its art or its difficulty. The art and music kind of speak for themselves, so I just want to say that, yes, Cuphead is difficult, but it's also very motivating and even friendly in some ways. You don't have to worry about lives or game overs or boss runs or checkpoints, and I think the progress meter at the end of the run is a great motivating tool to just tell me, I can do this. Cuphead rules. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Ryan, and thank you in advance to the other folks that we're going to be reading, but not quite yet. Eric, what do you think about what these fine gents have said? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I tend to have a lot of my reaction, kind of my overall thoughts about this game are pretty positive. Like I kind of said in my intro, my experience with it. When you look at this game, it does catch your eye because, again, there's nothing else really like it out there. I mean, the AAA video game industry machine has kind of become homogenized. And while I'm a sucker for a great game with cutting edge graphics, I think that as we get more and more advanced, we do kind of lose that, like Ryan alluded to. The 30s era of animation was something that was really special, really unique, and we all kind of, the cartoons that I feel like we kind of grew up with were inspired by that. But, as technology and time advance, things aren't quite the same way anymore. So, yeah, this is absolutely a love letter to that style of animation. And I'm sure we'll get into it as we go and talk about a little bit of the gameplay, but just kind of touch on difficulty a little bit. Yeah, I think that myself, because I didn't know too much about this game other than the trailers going in. I didn't really read any reviews. When I first played it, the difficulty caught me off guard. I was not prepared for something that was to this level, this degree of punishing for someone who's not prepared for it. But I agree with Dave points wholeheartedly. It's difficult in a way that is, I think, fair and not mean and not difficult just to be difficult. If you're looking at the games, this game kind of draws inspiration from a lot of those games back then were kind of designed difficult on purpose to kind of extend their lastability because older games didn't have the constant stream of online updates. So I think difficulty in this sense serves a different purpose, and it serves a very, very good purpose for this game specifically. But I'm sure we'll touch on that like a little more as we start to expand on some of the things that were said.
Oh, absolutely. I spent today reading a bunch of contemporary reviews from when Cuphead was new. And I mean, there was a controversy, might be a strong word, but there was a lot of rabble-rousing about this difficulty. People were not happy with it. But this game does what maybe not a lot, but this game does what some games do, and it blends this duality of two conflicting aesthetics, right? On one hand, the game looks like a pre-Disney hand animated, because it was hand animated. We're going to talk all about that. This sort of pre-Disney 30s era cartoons. It's got hot jazz, swing jazz, Dixieland, all of that. And then the other duality that provides dissonance against it is its intense difficulty. And we've seen games do that before, right? Like the first, I swear I don't know why this was the first thing that came to my mind, but like Dead or Alive, those games, the
Yes.
fighting games where it's pretty ladies in bikinis, but it's also a tough fighting game. It's that mash of aesthetics that makes it work, that makes it interesting. Cuphead does it to an incredibly polished degree. And, I kind of agree with Dave. It's punishing, but it's also very rewarding.
Yeah, like he said, they really do kind of, I could understand there being some controversy around it because, I mean, if you're a parent looking to buy your kids video games, obviously, right? This game looks like a very like fun, colorful, like safe type of game that we played when we grew up that you could buy for your kids. And then I imagine it would be pretty disappointing then you pick up a game for, little Jimmy, and then all of a sudden, he's just getting crushed by these bosses over and over. I would be disappointed too, but I that's an interesting time in which you're referring to, because when this game came out in 2017, I kind of felt like the conversation around difficulty was like a little more accepting. So I think that's interesting that there was this kind of like uproar about it. And maybe that was just due to like the trailers maybe not conveying that, or maybe it not being conveyed very clearly up front. Which at least what I read, it wasn't, because like I said, it caught me off guard. But again, because of the mechanics the game puts in place, this isn't really an issue, because like Dave said, it really does kind of keep pushing you to get better. And the bosses have like multiple stages, multiple evolutions that they go through to kind of mark your progress. And then like Dave said at the end, like you do get this kind of progress bar to see the progress that you've made. And it does give you, it's not really like a slap in the face. It's showing you, hey, you're getting better, you're getting further. Like, you were really, really close this time. It's almost like an encouragement, like a pat on the back to be like, hey, keep going, you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, those pats on the back in this game are few and far between, but they are there.
Yes.
Let's get into it a little bit. So, if you're new to the show, if you're a new listener, first of all, welcome. We're glad that you're here. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. Sit down anywhere. The water's fine. Can I get you a drink? Have you taught? How's the family? You good? Are you enjoying my derivative Mark Maron impression that I like doing from time to time? Because he's here. He's here. Okay, I'm done. What is Cuphead? A boss rush / run and gun shooter known for the duality of its retro, 30s inspired presentation and vicious difficulty. Protagonist brothers Cuphead and Mugman spend an afternoon gambling and manage to lose their souls to the devil. He offers his grace if they carry out his bidding and collect the souls of other monsters who haven't paid their debts. Pretty okay description, yeah?
I would agree. I mean, you're fighting the devil, so I mean, everybody can understand that.
Let's talk a little bit about how it was made. This game was the first by Studio MDHR. That is the developer and the publisher. They are a Canadian-based studio. It is made up of, and this game was created by, Chad and Jared Moldenhauer. They are brothers. So this is a family affair, and it's about to get even more of a family affair when you hear about who produced it. Ryan Moldenhauer and Marija Moldenhauer, apologies for that pronunciation. Art by Chad, Tyler, and Marija Moldenhauer, as well as Jake Clark. Written by Evan Skolnick and composed by Christopher Madigan. So as we talked about in our summations of this, and as Eric pointed out a couple of times, the creators, Chad and Jared, were really inspired by what's known as the golden age of animation. This is a little tangent. I don't like that term, golden age.
Yeah, it seems a little, I mean, I definitely think this was like a heightened era of animation for sure. And the couple of the sources that you check kind of like date these as all kind of like different times, right? Like some people are saying like the golden age of animation is like from the 1920s to like the 1960s or 1970s, like at the height of like the Looney Tunes cartoons. But, and again, I'm not an expert in animation any more than like the Wikipedia armchair expert that I've become in the last week, right?
Hey, I've got a podcast. I know about being a Wikipedia armchair expert.
It's kind of our calling card. We kind of have to do it, right? To make it sound like we know what we're talking about. But yeah, just to call it the golden age is kind of weird. It definitely was the age when animation kind of exploded. But around this time, kind of so was everything. Television was taking off. Movies was taking off. The roaring 20s and the depression that followed saw the invention of new technologies and new entertainment. So yeah, golden age is a little bit weird, but it certainly was a time of new and exciting technologies.
Well, it's not the placement of the golden age being in the 30s that bothers me. It's this concept of a golden age. We hear this a lot in musical theater too. You know, the golden age of musical theater with the Music Man and Anything Goes, and et cetera, et cetera. It implies that what comes after is not as good, when in reality, we've never been in a better time for animation. We've never been in a better time for music. We've never been in a better time for musical theater. So this, I know what they're saying with this idea of a golden age, but words matter and they can have implications. So that's just a little soapbox of mine that I got maybe more passionate about than I should in my graduate school studies, but hey,
that's okay.
So again, they were inspired by that, particularly this rubber hose style. I did some looking into this today. Do you know about this?
I read up on it a little bit, yeah, and it's mostly referring to like the way cartoons were drawn back in the day. A lot of these characters that you saw had these kind of rubber hose style limbs, and that's the description of the way that they would move and react on the screen. So, yeah, that's pretty much what I learned in my quick, brief study of animation.
No, that's exactly it, though. Like when you hear it described like rubber hose, and even hearing it, further described like, oh, they have this wobbly aesthetic when they move, you might be thinking like, oh, I can kind of see it. But when you see it on the screen, and when somebody like lifts their arm to take a drink of water and their arm bends like a noodle or like a hose, you're like, oh, I get it. I can't for the life of me think of any cartoons that use this, but it's something like I know it when I see it, to paraphrase that court hearing. And a lot of other games have used this style too, like Bendy and the Ink Machine was a really popular game that came out not that much longer after Cuphead that used this. Epic Mickey, I think, uses some of it too.
Yeah, I think that's probably a harkening back, because when I think of this style specifically, I definitely think of the early Mickey cartoons, the Steamboat Willie, where Mickey's early design is very much that kind of, he's got rubbery arms and legs, and he kind of like bounces around and flips all over the place. So yeah, it's kind of like this concept where you're like, oh, that's a little bit weird when you call it that. But as soon as you see it, there's a direct correlation. You're like, oh, that makes perfect sense as to why they call it that.
Well, it's interesting that you brought up Steamboat Willie and Walt Disney, because the rubber hose style of animation started to fall out of favor once the 30s came around. And in particular, once this style called full animation became really popular. And that was, of course, popularized by Walt Disney because he wanted his animations to be like really realistic, like a movie. So this kind of fell out of favor pretty quickly. Another little tidbit that I think you will appreciate that I found when looking this stuff up is that apparently the rubber hose style was also a big inspiration behind the Toon World monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh!, which were my favorites when I played Yu-Gi-Oh! As a kid.
Oh, interesting. I wasn't thinking of that specific example, but that makes a lot of sense. I thought you were actually going to tie it back to, the game I'm most well known for, Kingdom Hearts, because in Kingdom Hearts 2, there is a timeless river level that takes place in the aesthetic world of Steamboat Willie. So really cool to see Sora and all his friends get their kind of rubber hose treatment there as well.
Yeah, golly, if Kingdom Hearts, if only there were a comprehensive podcast talking about Kingdom Hearts.
Somebody should do a good one of those.
Oh, stop it. Maybe let's put our heads together. We'll think of one and we'll maybe tell them about it at the end of the episode. How's that sound?
For sure. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
This episode is all tangents all the time.
It's great.
It is great. I like this kind of podcast every now and then. So the brothers Moldenhauer, they tried creating a game back in 2000, and they failed because they didn't really have the tools, the capital, what have you. And they tried again with Cuphead specifically after the success of Super Meat Boy. That's not a game that I've played, but I like everything that I know about it. It seems like a game that I would really enjoy going through. And what happened was they did it. It was announced at E3, like you had mentioned a little bit ago, Eric, and it got pushed back a little bit. But once it came out, it really started a lot of conversations. Reception-wise, though, universal praise. I couldn't find anything from an actual news source that was lower than a 7.8 out of 10.
Seems like you're just kind of hating at that point. I mean, I definitely think the game definitely deserves its universal praise, because just when you learn a little bit about the history of like the whole Moldenhauer family was like involved in this project, so much so that that Chad and Jared remortgaged their house to make this game happen. And of course, Microsoft did come in and give them a little bit of help and, provide some financial support, but they really literally had everything on the line, like for this game, for pretty much the entire Moldenhauer family. And I think that really kind of shines through, because when you're willing to put that much on the line for something you really believe in, it really does feel like a work of love. And there's so much love and detail put into every corner and craft of this game. And to see, I can't imagine like what that must be like to have this concept in your head for something that's this unique and this incredible, based on going about this probably the most annoying way possible that you could to create this game, and to have it come out to, universal acclaim and have so much success with it that there's extra DLC and now there's even a Netflix show. Must be, that's great for them and their whole family, and it created a whole, studio and livelihood that they can have. So it's not just a great game, but I think it's a really feel good story for the Moldenhauer family specifically.
Yeah, I think I was reading something today. It was one of the creators. I don't know if it was Chad or Jared, but one of them was like a bricklayer, like a concrete, like working with concrete. And they were like, yeah, we didn't really know if this was going to succeed. So I kind of figured if it didn't, I'll just go back to laying concrete. Wow. And it's like, that's such a cool story. I love hearing about stuff like this. And of course, the implication here, the bias here, is that we only hear the success stories, right? We don't hear the stories of people that did fail and then went back to laying concrete. But it's still cool to hear all the same,
Yeah, what a career transition too, from literally like laying concrete construction to making video games, like complete
Right?
opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that, bricklaying and working with your hands like that is really satisfying, but
Right.
I don't know. I would take video game designer, I think.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, if I got to work on a passion project, probably I would. I don't know if I'd want to be a part of the soulless cog AAA video game machine. God bless those people for all the hard work that they do. But yeah, to work on something like this would be a once in a lifetime time for sure. And like you said, all of their inspirations, they specifically drew a lot of inspiration from the other not as well known animation studio at the time, because obviously the House of Mouse, Walt Disney just dominates all because they came out of that era, arguably the winner. Fleischer Studios was kind of the guiding North Star of the project, and that studio is more famous for, your Betty Boop, your Popeye. Those were probably the two biggest ones that came out of their studio for sure. Unfortunately, the brothers there, Max and Dave, had a pretty public falling out. They got acquired by Paramount in 1940, so Walt Disney kind of ended up the de facto kind of defining force of animation that was left. And you hit the nail on the head too. They kind of pioneered this new realistic style of animation that they kind of transitioned out of. And the first example that you can see about that is the 1937 hit Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. That's kind of where Disney was like, hey, this animation is great, but like this is the potential of what it could really be. And that kind of changed things, like you said, forever, going forward to like this more, like, you still had the principles of animation that they mostly adhered to, but Disney had just changed the game with Snow White for sure.
Yeah. For as many problems and misgivings as folks have with Disney today, and rightfully so, it's their influence and importance in the medium is simply undeniable. Snow White looked incredible for the time. It still looks damn good today.
I saw it when I was a kid, and I thought it had come out like maybe in the 80s. I had no idea it was a movie from 1937.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's nuts. And related to that, you sent me a really cool video of one of the animators of Cuphead doing a talk, like a presentation, a sort of masterclass, walking through the process of creating one of the bosses.
Yes.
Do you remember the animator's name by chance?
I want to say it was, I think you mentioned it. I think it was Clark. I want to say it was him.
Okay.
Because I just remember his story though. Yeah, he came out of the one of the schools of animation up in Vancouver. I can't remember, up in Canada. So that makes sense. And he came onto this, or he had spent some time kind of bouncing around. I forget the shows that he worked on, but he worked on a couple of high profile shows. But
for Netflix and Hulu and Nickelodeon, yeah.
Oh yeah, and his specialty really was in kind of like this. He had a specialty in like this 2D style of animation. So yeah, that was really cool to kind of see it. And now we're kind of transitioning into how they did this. When we say that the whole game was hand animated, like the whole game was hand animated. Every frame of motion that you see in this game was drawn by hand. The most annoying possible way that you could think to animate something, this game was done. So when people were like, oh, this game was announced in 2014, but took 3 more years to come out when they'd already been working on it for probably like 3 or 4 years. Well, yeah, when you have to draw literally everything from scratch, of course it's going to take a long time. And then everyone's like, oh, it took 5 years for a DLC to come out? Yes, because you have to draw everything by hand. It's every motion that you see a character make, at least my armchair understanding of animation, has to be hand drawn and then was scanned in, and they colored it in the computer and they put it into the engine and tried to get it to all work together. So yeah, Clark kind of walked us through that process of, and even then you're not just drawing like one character where it's like, oh, okay, I have this idea for the character, this is it. They went through probably hundreds of different iterations for each single boss that they put in that game. So it cannot be understated how much a pain in the ass this game probably was to make.
Yeah, and speaking of the revisions, in the video that you sent me of Clark explaining the process, you could see them doing the sketches and revisions and just playing with the style using different inspirations, like the final inspiration of Betty Boop. And then they also tried an early version of Betty Boop, and Wonder Woman was in there. Some other video game content was in there that they looked at. And it's super interesting. It's cool to see the artist's process like that. And I do want to just highlight what you said again, Eric, because it bears repeating. This was hand animated. They drew this frame by frame. And that is particularly astounding, one, because what a monumental effort that has to be, and two, that's not really how animation is done by and large today. So like when they wanted to pay homage to these old studios, they weren't just talking the talk, they walked the walk. They put all of their chips down and they said, we're gonna go, full hog on this. And I'm mixing so many metaphors, but the result is, stupendous. We're on visuals anyway, so let's talk about some of these bosses. Did you have a particular favorite? Just visually speaking, not mechanically speaking?
Oh, visually, I thought they were all, you'd figure that to put so many in a game like this, eventually they'd start to homogenize, but there was never a point where I ran into any one of the singular bosses and was like, oh, this is like kind of similar to one that came before. They're all incredibly striking and incredibly unique, even so much so that each boss that you fight has probably 3, 4, 5 different stages and transformations that it goes through. So not only are you animating what the base boss is going to look like, but then you have to kind of theme it out and be like, okay, this is the theme of the boss. Now it's going to transform into this, and now it's going to transform into that, or the fight's going to change this way or change that way. The one that really sticks out in my mind to that one is Hildeberg on the first island. So she starts off as kind of like this, flying Blaine, like kind of blimp lady, and you're fighting her, and she transforms into a bunch of different stuff. She transforms into like an oxen with horns that like will dive at you, and she transforms into 2 girls like spiraling around one another that shots just come out of. And then when you get her to her final stage, she transforms to like an entire moon and takes up the whole stage. So you're going from a character that is essentially like a blimp or a zeppelin or whatever, and ending up with a character that is like a moon that's half the size of the screen. So I liked her. Ribby and Croaks was really cool on the first island. I love the boxing frogs is such a just kind of cool and works really well with that rubber hose style of animation. And that fight in particular too has a lot of homages to Street Fighter 3 in it, I believe. So much so whereas like the punches he's throwing are kind of like mini Hadoukens. And when he turns into the slot machine, if he lands on the devil, that's like a reference to like M. Bison. So just really, really cool stuff. So that was a good one. Jimmy the Great was another one that I really loved on the second island. Grim Matchstick, which is the dragon. That one is really, we're talking about difficulty. That one's really hard, but I love Grim Matchstick a lot. I love that might be my favorite fight in the game just because you're jumping from cloud top to cloud top, fighting this dragon up there. And in the meantime, they have this tower that's spinning in the background that's piercing the clouds. And the cool thing about the backgrounds too is they're all watercolor hand painted as well. And that tower that they made for that fight specifically was an actual 3D tower that they just photographed like hundreds of times from every angle. So, there are ones that I hate based on difficulty, but in terms of like style and the way that they look, I'd be hard pressed to name a couple that are like, I think would stand above the rest. I think they're all fantastic.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's tough. And that was maybe not a great question by me because we could go off and talk about almost literally every boss because they all look just so damn good.
Right.
I particularly also like it's not a hostile character. The shopkeeper. He's this big fat pig with an eye patch. He kind of leans over the counter and he's got this voice that's like welcome. And I'll probably put it in because I can't do it. And yeah, it's really neat. The Cuphead and Mugman themselves, which I didn't specify this, but you can play as either, or you could play with a friend, as you did, Eric.
Yes.
And they're both their designs look relatively similar. Mugman's got fuller eyes, like bigger eyes, whereas Cuphead is more like angular eyes. You see that a lot in, the protagonist will have the angled eyes. And Cuphead is red and Mughead is, wait, what did I say? Cuphead is red and Mugman, not
yes.
Mughead. Mugman is blue in terms of the shorts that they wear, that is to say.
Yes, Mughead's the less successful brother for sure.
Yeah, Mughead's the third brother that stayed home and was like, I'm 32, I'm over this shit.
he didn't gamble and lose his soul, so he he listened to the Elder Kettle for sure. But yeah, if you would allow me to, because did you get a chance to play this co-op at all? Any chance?
No, that's one thing that I've never done is play this co-op.
Okay. Yeah, I have, I'd say probably a majority of my time spent playing this was in co-op. So the co-op is super cool. Obviously, the difficulty is kicked up a notch because you have a second character pouring damage into the bosses. It's super fun to play with friends. That elation that you get of conquering a difficult challenge like this with a buddy is super cool. When we were at my friend's house playing this, I'm pretty sure still to this day there were words uttered that the walls remember. Now that my other friend lives there, I ask if they can hear the walls whisper the terrible things that we said just playing this game. But I think that in a way that it's difficult just because the difficulty factor is leveled up by having another person. Having an additional thing to keep track of on screen does get a little bit confusing. When we were playing together, I found myself multiple times, even though Cuphead and Mugman are distinct colors, I did find myself oftentimes like confusing which one I was, just because it's not an understatement to say like there is so much happening on screen that you have to keep track of at once. So and they look similar enough to the point where if I'm not looking at my character, if I'm just keeping track of a character out of my periphery and just trying to see what the boss is doing, you can 100% confuse yourself for the other character. But I still think that the benefits of having one of the rare games these days that you're able to kind of play local co-op now, and it's not just an online co-op thing. That feeling was kind of like the last great feeling of, having your buddies over and playing games on the couch and stuff. Cuphead was kind of like the real last feeling that I've ever had with that, and nothing's really kind of recaptured that since.
We kind of had this co-op conversation regarding TMNT Shredder's Revenge, didn't we?
Yes, a little bit, yes. And I never got a chance to play that co-op.
Yeah. Oh, that's a blast, man. And I agree with you, dude. I love these couch co-op games. It's a bygone, well, it's not completely, but it's almost a bygone era because technology is just advancing at such a rapid rate. And, a lot of people have had things to say like that, like good old Ted Kaczynski, but for better or for worse, I'm sorry. My brain is all over the place today. I'm making jokes and tangents left and right. They're not all sticking. Okay. It's fine. But yeah, this couch style co-op is super cool. I miss it so much. A lot of it is nostalgia, but I mean, a lot of these co-op experiences and playing in the room with somebody else, it's just not something that you can wholesale replace. It's a very special thing to do and to experience. And I love games like this and like Shredder's Revenge that are, bringing it back a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely don't think it would be the same type of experience without it, for sure. I'm glad that they made the effort to include that, and it does give you just a little bit more margin for error. So, like, if you run out of health, you can use the parry mechanic to like revive your buddy to get an extra life. But then it's like the trade-off of, okay, is he in a safe spot that I can revive him and not like get myself killed? So it kind of adds another layer of complexity to an already complex game. And like I said, overcoming that challenge with your buddies, that's just, like you said, it's especially having gone through the pandemic and, being locked away from people for so literally you were not allowed to sit on the couch and play games with people. Like we were supposed to stay home. And it's just something that, yeah, I hope I know it'll be there in diminished returns late, because obviously it's the internet age and that's the way games are going. But I hope there's still games like Cuphead that afford us that ability to be able to sit on the couch and play with people, because there's that human element that you can't replace.
And I think too, the difficulty lends itself actually as a positive to this idea of couch co-op, because you are bonding with a friend in this unique and intensely trying experience, and you can revel in your failure together, and you can to quote you, say words and phrases that the walls will remember, which I love that phrase, by the way. That's beautiful. So it's a bonding experience, right? It's as much as anything else. It's really cool. Since we're kind of trailing into mechanically how this game works, we've kind of danced around a little bit. Let's get into that. Let's talk about how this game plays in the hands. You thought the music break meant that we were going right in. Psych. We've got a couple
surprise.
We've got a couple more community correspondences to read. This one from Aaron from Super Pod Saga, aka Scabzilla, aka Shitposter Extreme in every Discord that I'm in.
Absolute mad lad.
He says this about Cuphead. What I really enjoyed about Cuphead is that even though it's very difficult, it's not at all unfair. With each death, you slowly progress more and more, and exactly like Dave said, you remember Dave's review, that meter really makes it seem like you can do anything. I also appreciate how easy it is to restart when you die. It's like dead, restart, new run. And I appreciate that so much. I fucking hate being bogged down by menu after menu after menu. Yeah, I think there are elements of genuine unfairness in this, but we're going to save the difficulty conversation for the very end, I think. Mm-hmm. But that idea, it's not dissimilar to roguelikes, I guess, in that fashion, because you die, you start a new run. Well, it's not really a new run because you don't really lose all that much, but you die, you try again, you die, you try again. You're not going to have to redo like from level 1.
Yeah, I think if this game had a type of thing, like you said, I'm sure we'll expand on it a little more towards the end or when we're talking about gameplay. If it had something to the point where it's like, oh, you died and now all of a sudden to get back to the boss, you had to like do like a 2 to 3 minute like level or platforming section, I think that would really suck. But the fact that this game understands what it is and gets you back into the action right away, you don't really have time to dwell on the fact that you're like, oh, that was really hard and that sucked. You're back in the action pretty much as soon as you die. So, and I think the length and pacing of the bosses too definitely lend a great deal of that feel to it.
And we do have one more piece of correspondence. I'll save it for a little bit. Sorry, Keaton, but it's coming. But let's talk about getting into that action and how that articulates. So this game is largely just a series of boss battles. It's a boss rush in that way, but there are run and gun levels interspersed. And we can maybe talk about those after this conversation, but the game plays the exact same no matter which stage. And lucky for you, when the game starts, you're greeted with a tutorial level pretty much right away. Mm-hmm. So here are the things that you can do if you don your cup and fill it to the brim as Cuphead or Mugman. You can run, obviously. You can jump. You can't double jump normally, but if you press A again when you're jumping, or X, whatever you're using, you get a parry. You can parry certain items in this game for various points and goodies. You can shoot. That's your main weapon. There are not actual weapons in this game. You shoot out of your finger, which I think is a very cute touch. It would be bizarre to see Cuphead pull out like a Glock.
He's not messing around this time. It's Cuphead 2, grittier and rebooted.
Yeah. Can we get something in a grittier Cuphead?
Yeah,
what's Pedro Pascal doing right now? Can we get him on this?
We're going to have From Software make the next Cuphead game.
Oh, God damn it. This doesn't need to be any more difficult. But you can shoot. You can shoot and aim. If you press one of the triggers, you can aim while you're shooting or while you're running. Both works. You've got a special meter as well. So you've got a special shot. It's usually just a stronger version of one of your other attacks, but you can upgrade those, just as you can upgrade your main attack, by the way. And you also have a dash mechanic. Now, this dash mechanic, I was playing this on stream, and one of the first upgrades that you can get, it's called a charm. You can equip 2 of those, I believe. Mm-hmm. One of the charms that everybody gets right away, because it's one of the best charms you can get, is a smoke dash. And what that does is it turns your dash, it makes you invulnerable and invisible during the duration. It gives you iframes, in other words. The normal dash doesn't have any iframes. This is something that Dave said, and I agree wholeheartedly. This smoke dash should have just been part of the game. Like, you shouldn't be punished for wanting 2 other charms. This dash should have just been the smoke dash from the start.
I think that's interesting because I agree with you in point, because yes, the smoke dash, I was excited to talk about this because I think there's a lot of different ways you can approach the charms, and the different guns that you get give you a lot of options to approach bosses in different ways, which I think is very, very cool. It doesn't pigeonhole you into one style of play. Yeah, it's a wide consensus that the smoke dash is actually like the most powerful thing you can have, because essentially instead of just having a dash that travels in a horizontal line across the stage with a burst of speed, you're basically disappearing in a puff of smoke and then reappearing a short ways away later. So you're physically not there for a moment. So it's a nice little thing that gets you out of the way of damage in a pinch. My only argument to the point, there were a couple times where I unequipped the smoke dash because, like you said, you do not see where you are for a moment. And sometimes if you're not judging the dash right, and you're trying to like smoke dash to a platform, I like miss the platform sometimes. So I think that was the incentive of like not making that the default dash, because there were some times where I was like, I need to give up the invulnerability that the dash provides me because it screwed me over too many times. So that was kind of my thinking on it, but 100% out of all these charms you can get, if you're a first-time player, like the smoke dash will help you out immensely.
Yeah, and not just the run and gun levels with the smoke dash being a little bit tricky. One of the first bosses that you fight on the first island is a flower that's been memed to oblivion. I love the memes of the flower.
Yes.
But it'll have like platforms that you have to use because eventually it will make the entire floor a damage zone, right? With spikes and vines. And I fell quite a few times because my smoke dash, I anticipated being a little bit to the left, but I ended up going a little bit to the right, And one of the things, to its credit, while I still wish smoke dash would have just been, or at the very least, while I wish the dash would have had invincibility in general, if you are on a stage where you're like, oh man, I know these attacks inside and out, I don't need the smoke dash. You can take it off just for one boss. You can customize your charms, weapons, and specials to each individual boss and level. You're not punished for doing that. So that's a really nifty way of approaching this. My first playthrough, I generally just kept smoke dash, but my second one, this most recent time, and I didn't beat it this most recent time, by the way. But this recent time, I would juggle everything, like every battle. Like, what do I need for this one? Oh, I don't need the smoke dash. Oh, this is this is this guy. I could really use that low what's the word? This short range but high damage projectile.
Like the spread shot.
Yeah, that's my favorite one to equip.
Yeah, I found myself too kind of similar as you, and I think that when you do an additional playthrough, like you have enough, like you get coins through the running gun stages that allow you to visit Pork Ryan's shop and buy the upgrades. So if this is a multiple, like your like 7th or 8th or however many playthroughs, to get the smoke dash right away. A new player isn't going to know that. So to have such a thing so powerful, not like be telegraphed, be like, hey, like this is something that can really help you out. That does kind of suck. But yeah, no, I agree with you. And I very clearly remember on my first playthroughs, I was very much stuck where I was like, I like the original pea shooter and I like the chaser because that I can just shoot and the bullets will chase it. That will heat sink to the enemy, and I don't have to worry. I can just focus on platforming while bullets just chase the enemy. But as I went through an additional playthrough, like a solo playthrough, and then playing on like the expert difficulty, where experimentation is really needed to kind of succeed, you kind of start to see, like some of these bosses have like a specific thing that you can use against them, like using Grim Matchsticks, for example. I definitely like keeping the smoke dash on for that for sure. But my default blaster that I use is I really like the charge shot for Grim Matchstick because I can charge up my blast and then focus on platforming and then shoot when I feel safe. And you might think, oh, well, you're not getting the same like spread of damage with just a single charge shot, but the charge shot does a lot of damage. It's balanced enough to the point where you're still outputting the same amount of damage, even though you feel like you're shooting less.
One thing about, these charge shots that do a lot of damage, the various different kinds of shots that you can equip that might do more or less damage, that's all well and good. One thing that this game doesn't have is it doesn't have a health meter for the bosses. And I was thinking about this. I'm undecided on whether or not I think that would be a boon for most people, or even for myself. Because on one hand, having a health meter will show you exactly like how much, time left you have with this boss or how much time you have left with this phase. On the other hand, it would be really demoralizing to see a gigantic health meter just get plinked away whenever you have the weaker shots and think to yourself, oh my God, this is going to take so long. You know what I mean? I don't know. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I could see the argument for both sides. And I remember seeing earlier builds of the game where I think like they had some kind of health bar thing present. But to me, the point of Cuphead, it really is like, yes, you're playing the video game, you're trying to overcome these challenging bosses, but I think Studio MDHR really wanted you to see and appreciate the visuals, and I think a health bar on screen would just kind of distract from that, because like I said, you're playing a video game, so that yes, you want to see the health, you want to overcome the challenge, but part of the magic of Cuphead 2 is taking in all of these visuals, and even my most recent playthrough, I went back and I noticed things that I didn't before. I was kind of like, oh, that's like a cute little thing they added here. So I think that the progress bar at the end is motivating enough, because to me, if I saw the health bar getting slower and slower, and I'm like, I'm getting closer, that stresses me out. I would get anxiety and I start to play worse because I'm like, I'm getting too stressed out of how close I am. So I think the way that Cuphead marks your boss progress with not only the multiple transformations that the bosses go through, but then when you do fail, the progress bar at the end, I think that to me it makes the HP bar not such a big deal, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And for the record, I am leaning towards, I think it's better that they don't have one. But I want to touch on something you brought up before, this notion of visual clutter. And having an HP bar or a HP bar, if you're one of our friends across the pond, it would add to what's already on screen. And you had mentioned playing with your friends. Sometimes you could get disoriented and forget which one you are.
Yes.
I think you'll agree with me, but I'm going to say it's not because things aren't clearly defined. It's because the screen becomes a battle zone and there's just a lot going on.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
never going to wonder oh, is that little thing running an enemy, or is it just something in the background? You'll never wonder that. But there's just so much on the screen that it can become almost cluttered. It never totally gets cluttered. Okay, it maybe sometimes does get cluttered. But it's by and large, it's not a huge issue, but I can imagine adding another friend like you said that you did and having a health bar for the boss. There would be too much visual stimuli and it would just be completely overwhelming for most people, myself included.
Yeah, absolutely. Not every, I would say not, some bosses are a little less intensive than others, but there are some where I think of Wally Warbles when he does the feather attack and there are just hundreds of feathers on the screen at the same time, or the boss that I absolutely hated the most with an undying vengeance, Dr. Call's robot. Excuse my French, fuck that boss. That was the boss I hated the most. And especially, we didn't mention this either too, but when you're playing, there are very few of the boss stages where you get an airplane and they're kind of flying like traditional shmup style levels. The flying levels in particular get very, very chaotic. I seem to remember those having the most visual stimuli on the screen at once. And yeah, like you said, you're never wondering about any of the things scurrying around. You just know everything I touch on this stage can potentially kill me. I need to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the flying. I universally dislike these for the most part. You're in a plane during these, so you can not only move on the y-axis but the x-axis as well. I said that backwards, but you know what I mean. You can move up, down, and all around. You obviously don't need to jump, so your A button or X button will just serve to parry, so that's fine. You don't have a dash. Instead, when you hold the dash button, you turn into a miniature little plane, which is very, very cute to see. And you move really quick, but your shooting is significantly less ranged. Besides that, it's more of the same. It's still, taking down the boss, plinking down their HP while avoiding all of the obstacles. I don't have a good reason why I don't like the flying levels. I just I maybe it's just personal taste. I didn't like them.
I have like I'd say probably I'm split about 50-50. Like two of them, like Wally Warbles I really like, and Jimmy the Great, the genie one. I really like those flying levels in particular. Calamaria is pretty cool too. The robot one, like I hate that robot one so much. That one sucks. It sucks so bad. I cannot express my hatred enough for that level. That level specifically. And it's not a bad level. It's not a bad boss. Like it's still great. It's hard. But I think it has to do with you have so many other options as to the way to approach the other bosses when it's not an airplane. You're able to switch out charms, guns. I just think there's so much more variety there. Whereas the airplane levels, like you're locked into, like you said, Y and X axis. You can change and get small, but your charms don't matter. You can't use the smoke dash. You can't change the way your gun is. It's just you're shooting from your airplane, and you get like a little like lob. You switch between bullets and like a little like bomb you can lob in some of the later stages. But the variety is definitely lacking there, and all the bosses are pretty much just similar. Whereas you're flying the bosses on the right side, you're on the left side, and you're just kind of going up and down and around. So definitely less variety. I understand them wanting to do that to like give you like more visually distinct bosses and kind of break up the pacing of the bosses a little bit. But they are way less unique and way less approachable, I think, than the standard boss fights.
Yeah, really well said. But I will say I do prefer the airplane levels to the run and gun levels. So let's talk about those a little bit.
Absolutely.
So we talked all about the boss rushes. And again, we didn't say this, but you probably intuited, listeners, we're not going to talk about every boss because I cannot imagine a more plotting podcast to listen to than here's this one. Now here's this one. Now here's this one. Here's this one. You tired yet? You done yet? Are we there yet? I gotta pee. So just, if we didn't talk about yours, sorry, your favorite, sorry. It's just the way the world turns. But let's talk about these run and gun levels, man, because I don't like these at all. It's the same controls as the boss rush. I mean, you've got all the same bag of tricks, but you are running to get to the end of a level. I feel like I'm talking a lot. What do you think, Eric? Like, what's your read on these run and gun levels?
I was gonna say I felt like I was talking a lot, going off on my anti-robot hate rant, but
no, man. Listen, if I didn't want you to talk a lot, I wouldn't have invited you.
Just be like, God, shut him up already. Then yeah, the Kingdom Hearts episode is gonna be fun. I won't shut up, but anyways, yeah, the run and gun levels I think are unanimously hated. I haven't talked to a single person that's played this game that say that the run and gun levels are their favorite part. Again, I understand what they were trying to do. It breaks up the monotony a little bit. I understand. The thing that sucks about them most is that they're in some instances they're harder than the bosses, and it's
100%.
It's just chaos. And it would be fine if you could like clear the enemies as you go, but the enemies infinitely like respawn, and so you're constantly under a barrage of like nonstop. Those are the only parts of the game to me that feel like they are like quote unquote Nintendo hard, and it's bullshit in there for no reason. And the thing that's worse about those two is like you kind of are forced into doing them because the coins that you use in Pork Rinds Shop are hidden in the run and gun stages. So if you're not good at the run and gun stages, you're not going to be able to get coins to buy upgrades. And I think that's kind of sucky to lock something that's that important behind something that to me that's the running gun levels are visually they look great and I love them, like everything about them, but mechanically, gameplay wise, the running gun levels are by far the weakest parts of the game.
I don't, and by the way, nice foreshadowing with that phrase, Nintendo difficult. That's something I have in my notes to talk about later. It's quality reporting here on Pixel Project Unlockables Radio.
We know all of the trigger words.
Yeah, we've got that SEO on lock.
Right.
So I think it's fine that they hid the coins, the acquisition of the coins as part of the run and gun levels, right? I mean, it makes them pragmatic. You have to do them to proceed, don't get me wrong, but I mean, they have a purpose. Genuinely, I think the reason that they frustrate me so much is because they are in my opinion, more difficult than almost every boss. They make old school Mega Man look tame.
That's saying something.
That's saying a lot. Oh, the one pro that I can give, and again, this past playthrough I did not finish the game. The one pro that I will give the run and gun levels over the boss rushes is that some bosses have moves that incorporate randomness. They don't all, by and large, they do all have set patterns, and you could tell what attacks are coming. Some of them will spawn randomized things that can hurt you. That is frustrating because then it's no longer a check of skill. It becomes luck infused. And that's frustrating in a game that prides itself on difficulty. The run and gun levels, they don't really have as much of that randomness. I mean, the enemies are going to spawn somewhat randomly, but they spawn so frequently that it almost doesn't matter. You know, it's that I don't remember the law, the social science law that, like, you know, true randomness is a little less random than like 99.996% random. That's yes. Like they talk about that in algorithms for like shuffle playlists. I don't know, but yes. It almost doesn't matter. That makes the run and gun levels a little more bearable for me. It's because I generally always know what's coming, even if it is really tough.
The one stage where I think about that and agree with you on the randomness is the boss. I think it's on the second island, Baroness von Bonbon. She has the cake castle or whatever. And
interestingly, her gimmick is, I like that boss quite a bit. I love the designs.
Yeah, I do too. But the randomness in there kind of, I think, exemplifies your point really well. And the whole gimmick of that stage is like she's behind her like cake castle walls, and she sends out like different little mini minions for you to fight before you actually get to fight her. So like one is like an old time gumball machine, one is like a candy corn, a waffle, and these are all randomized. They come out, and you never know which ones you're going to get. I think you have to defeat 3 of them to progress to the next stage of the fight. Once you defeat one of them, there also start to come out like little like just minions that like run across the screen out of her castle while the big guys are running around. And that to me right there is the point where the randomness always screwed me over, because there comes a point where like you're trying to dodge the big guy that came out of the castle, and then the little thing that's like scurrying across the screen that sometimes you can't see because it's small. And then you're kind of locked into this like, well, no matter where I go or what I do, this is out of my hands. I'm going to get hit. And yeah, those are the points where it's like there are a few points in this game where, yeah, there's like literally nothing you can do, and you're going to take that hit. And it does kind of suck for a game that is mostly pretty mechanically sound and gives you the ability to kind of like flex the skills that you learn as you play the game, and you get better and better at the game. But yeah, there are those moments of randomness where it's just like everything kind of lines up perfectly, and the big boss is doing something, and something smaller on the stage is doing something, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough, but there's another boss, and I want to say, I can't remember who it is. I think it's a sand level, like there's sand, but it spawns some randomized sort of attacks that are a little frustrating. I don't think it's Hilda, what's her face of the moon. I don't think it's
Jimmy the Great, the big genie guy.
Maybe it is Jimmy the Great. It might be. Very frustrating, but yes. It is what it is. The run and gun levels, you just got to grit your teeth and get through them and get those coins for Pork Rinds Emporium.
Mm-hmm. He's got to have his coins. It's very important.
Do you think other inhabitants of Inkwell Isle shop there? Or do you think it's just Cuphead and Mugman buying weapons for violence?
I have to imagine that he has other things, because, yeah, on the minimap there are other inhabitants of the Inkwell Isles, which is a really nice touch. But I know he's got stuff in the background of his shop I didn't really ever notice. But yeah, he seems to specifically, how convenient, have things that Cuphead and Mugman need on their journey. So yeah, I can't imagine that would just be. Are you saying that you should promote open carry on the Inkwell Isles, Rick? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I'm a big proponent for open carry. You know me. I think it should be in. I think it should be in Disney. They're pushing an agenda, Eric. I don't know. Have you heard about this? Listen, I heard that George Soros. No, I'm just kidding. We're not gonna. That's not this.
I was gonna say I'm on the devil's side on this one. I think he was completely taken advantage of.
Oh, this has been the economics of Cuphead and the Cuphead universe.
Right.
If you want to donate to our cause,
Part 2 is Cuphead going woke.
Yeah, the woke agenda, the woke mob. Yeah, that's the next DLC. Speaking of DLC, let's just touch on that a little bit. You said that you haven't played it, right?
I have not. No, I've wanted to. It came out, I think it was last year it came out. I believe it was 2022. I was just in the middle of playing other things and I didn't get around to it. I want to, because I think from what I've seen of it, looks just as great as all this other stuff.
Oh, yeah, no worries. I haven't played it either.
Oh, okay.
You are right. It was released in June of 2022, June 30th. It was revealed at E3 in 2018 for release in 2019. But, they pushed it back to 2020 because, this stuff is difficult. And then COVID happened, so they pushed it back even further because of that. But this DLC, it is appropriately titled Delicious Last Course. I like that. It features a new playable character in the form of Ms. Chalice, as well as some new levels and some new bosses. My understanding is that Ms. Chalice, her gimmick makes her a little easier to play than Cuphead and Mugman.
Yeah, I understand she's kind of like, I wouldn't say easy mode, but an augmented kind of difficulty. That is based on my understanding. And yeah, Miss Chalice being, and I don't know how this works out like in story, but you actually do run into her in the original base game too. You have these mausoleums that you go to that you kind of have to protect, like her urn or her chalice or whatever, and she gives you like additional super moves. So yeah, they kind of expanded on her, making her kind of the crux of the story, so that you go to the next island, do whatever she's doing over there. So yeah, you do run into her, but I don't know much beyond that, or I've heard that she's kind of like eases the difficulty a little bit, but I don't have any firsthand experience with that.
And her stages outside of the DLC are parry challenges. They're testing your ability to parry consistently. I like those a lot because I'm quite good at the parries.
I was gonna say, was that a mechanic that you utilized a lot? Like when stuff was on screen to parry, were you like going out of your way to try and parry it?
I tried to.
Okay.
Because when you parry stuff, if you're playing in 2-player mode, parrying can bring your partner back, which is obviously very good. In 1-player mode, it's going to fill your super meter quicker. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do believe that is correct.
Yeah, and that's an invaluable thing to have if you're fighting against a boss that's particularly tough. So I was parrying as much as I could feasibly. It wasn't like, focus number one, but if I was anywhere near it, I was trying to parry.
Right. I could, even my multiple playthroughs now, I still have a hard time of breaking my brain to like go towards the projectile that can potentially hurt me and try to parry it. I find myself always almost defaulting to my base gamer instincts and just dodging. So even multiple playthroughs in, like parrying hasn't really been something that I've focused on. And one of the charms too does give you a cool thing where it's like if you jump into any parryable object, it'll automatically parry it. The one stage, I forget who was it, the Phantom Express, where the gimmick is you're on like the cart and you can parry the handles to like move it along the stage. That one gave me a lot of trouble because I was not as practiced at the parry by the time you got to that one. So
You're taught to parry pretty early on, though. In the run and gun stages, parrying is generally just for bonus points and to get like hard to reach coins.
Right.
Because what happens is when you parry, you get kind of a bounce. So it's a functional second jump in that way. But like in one of the first bosses, the 2 Street Fighter frogs that you had mentioned before, at one point they turn into a slot machine because why not? And you have to parry the handle of the slot machine to progress the battle. So they're testing you real early on this stuff to make sure that you get it, which is nice. I do think that the pace of this, that is to say the pace of like the progression, is really good. I mean, they don't expect you to be good at everything right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they give you the tools. Like you said, I think that really simple tutorial does a great job of being like, hey, here are your basic commands, here are your basic verbs, and this is, everything you can pretty much do in the game. And then, yeah, they do a good job of like structuring it in a way that they test you on these things intermittently just to make sure you remember you're learning, at least getting practice in how to do them. So you always have that thing in your tool belt that you can whip out if you need it.
Yeah, it's a great tutorial. I mean, the only issue is the difficulty ramps up by a factor of like 15 after you get out of the tutorial. But it is a very fine tutorial. It's well explained, helps you out. It's great.
Yeah, I agree.
One thing that's also good in the tutorial and in the Inkwell Isle and the run and gun stages and everywhere, that's going to be the soundtrack and sound design. And I think it's far past the time that we need to talk about that. So let's get into it. What's up?
No, nothing. I was just dancing to the imaginary soundtrack.
Oh.
I'm imagining it being inserted in the episode already, so.
This soundtrack is terrific. I mean, there's just no two ways about it.
I mean, I'd have to agree with you 100%. This, again, everything goes towards the goal of making this feel like it was from the 1930s, and it's from that era of animation, 1930s, including the music, based on my understanding. And I watched a little bit more videos of the way that they recorded this in a live studio in Canada with real instruments. And, you know, all of the music is like, there's not one track out of place where I'd be like, oh, this doesn't really feel like a Cuphead track. All the themes of the music, like, I think matched the game absolutely perfectly. You couldn't get anything better. And I really like too that in different tracks, at least the way me listening to it, my untrained ear, different instruments are given time to shine in different tracks, whether it's like piano or saxophone or trumpets or anything like that. Every instrument really kind of gets a chance to kind of shine. And one thing a video said too, and I didn't get a chance to confirm this, is if you're fighting the boss and like you lose multiple times, each time you face the boss, a different instrument in the track kind of like gets the volume bumped up a little bit, and it's kind of featured, so it's a little bit different each time.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't notice that either, but I'd like to go back and check it out.
See, we didn't notice it because we're just so good. We just don't die.
No, I beat the game in like 20 minutes.
With a DDR pad.
Exactly, right. That'd be impressive.
So, as we said at the beginning, this was composed by Christopher Madigan, and it is a full jazz band. So what that means is you've got 5 saxes, 2 altos, 2 tenors, a bari. You've got 4 trombones, 4 or 5 trumpets. I don't actually know. I think you can have 4 or 5 trombones too. And a rhythm section that consists of guitar, upright bass, piano, and drums. I think, according to Madigan's Twitter bio, I think he was the percussionist and drummer for the tracks, but I might be wrong. And like you said, Eric, this was all recorded live with live musicians. Big hell yeah from me. I mean, my background is in music, and having live musicians record this soundtrack, it's phenomenal. And there's a really great YouTube video from the studio, from the development studio, that shows them recording one of the tracks. It's really great. It's really cool to see professional studio musicians doing this. The styles vary, which is very cool. I didn't mean that pun. So you're going to hear a bunch of different styles of jazz music. For example, Inkwell Isle 1 takes an influence from early New Orleans style jazz. So think of Louis Armstrong and Bix Beiderbecke. Botanic Panic makes use of a tuba as a dominant bass voice instead of the upright bass, which is very popular in those 20s style of big bands, while still using a more modern vocabulary. Floral Fury incorporates a lot of Latin jazz aesthetics and its rhythm, in its melodicism, and in its harmony. And Funhouse Frazzle is ragtime, centered on the aesthetic of ragtime, like Art Tatum and etc. There's just a host of variety of different kinds of subgenres of jazz in here, and it's all performed and written incredibly well.
I love watching you cook when you're in your element. It's as the kids say, let Rick cook. I wouldn't have even known anything about that. I'm just over here like, yeah, I like music. It sounds good.
Well, you are a former saxophone player yourself, from what I understand.
Former, yeah. It's been too long. I should maybe pick up and play again, but you know how life is sometimes.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. No, I get it.
No, I think the music there's so many soundtracks that I was just like, oh yeah, like this soundtrack is synonymous with the team. It just makes perfect sense. This soundtrack makes absolute perfect sense for this game, and if it was any different. And like you said, I think the live band just really adds to the style and the theme of it. I'm sure some video game soundtracks use live scored orchestras and stuff like that, but a lot of music too is made through computer instruments, and I don't think you get the same quality or feel when you go that route. And I understand the big industry AAA machine, like you got to do what you got to do, but there's just something about having that live band that really just, like I said, in a game that already feels alive because of the animation style and the gameplay, the music just adds to that feeling of it being even more alive because it's literally live.
There are plenty of games that have done this in the past and continue to do it with the live tracks. One of the benefits of a live band for this is, and anybody that's ever tried to work with MIDI recordings and MIDI patches for jazz will know what I'm talking about, is the inflections are not something that MIDI can always emulate accurately. You've got the inflections in terms of the articulation, right? Do we want to clean that articulation, or do we want a bit of a scoop into it? Do we want a bit of a fall off of it? Do we want it to be bitten off? That's not something that you can program precisely. And which is good for us with the rise of AI taking over our lives. And that's really cool. But there's also all of the solos in here, they're improvised.
I was going to say,
when you're playing in a jazz band and you're improvising, there are, for a recording, I should say specifically, there are a couple of different ways that you can do it. I've done it before when I've recorded where you play like 5 choruses and they piece together like all 5 into one. So sort of like your best bits. Or they might just, take the best out of the 5. I'm not sure how they did this here. But that's something obviously that MIDI cannot do. They cannot improvise. And they did that here. And it's great because they're on fire. The pianists, the saxophonists, the trumpets, it's terrific. It's so good. And one thing that's not strictly jazz is the intro music that you heard at the front of the episode, that little barbershop quartet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Cuphead and his pal Mugman, they like to roll the dice. By chance they came upon a devil's game, and gosh, they paid the price. Paid the price. And now they're fighting.
I unironically really like barbershop quartets. There was a summer where I got like really into it, and I was watching like barbershop competitions of like quartets just singing.
That's incredible that they'd even have that. That's so cool. But yeah,
they have it.
Like you said, it's such a just a nice touch. Everything about it goes towards serving the theme of the game. And like you said, even that barbershop quartet, yeah, that's like every time I'm at the pause menu, I'll listen to the whole thing. I'll sit there and listen to the whole thing because it's so great.
Yeah, I can't really imagine this. This isn't a game that I would recommend anybody put on mute and listen to a podcast while playing. It's just, it's such a cohesive experience. It perfectly complements the art style. It's great.
10 out of 10. I highly recommend listening to it.
Well, if you insist, let's listen to a little bit. Okay, before we get into our last little bit of the discussion, one more piece of community correspondence from Poppy the Keaton, regular corresponder and great friend of the show. Here's what he has to say. Best part of Cuphead is the variety. variety of enemies, variety of enemy forms, variety of different weapons, and variety of different playstyles. Seriously, try getting the pacifist ratings in the run and gun levels. It's really rewarding. When I streamed a little bit of this, Keaton came into my stream and he was talking about doing a pacifist run of the run and gun levels where you just get to the end without killing any of the enemies. Dude, I don't know how to do it.
I was gonna say, that sounds awful. It sounds so hard.
It's so hard. There are so many enemies, and you've got to smoke dash right past them and jump. Oh my goodness, I can't imagine. That's real tough.
I hold down the shoot button and I don't let go until I'm at the end for those run and gun levels. Like, no way.
Yeah, it is real. That would be an extra bit of added difficulty, which segues real nicely into this next bit. We've got to talk about the difficulty with this game. It's become part and parcel with this game's identity, is its difficulty. And this, believe it or not, this was intentional. You very, very adeptly and perfectly foreshadowed with this phrase, Nintendo hard. I was doing some reading today, and I found an interview on a website that was riddled with typos, so I did have to alter the text a little bit to make it readable. Mm-hmm. And one of the Moldenhauer brothers, Tyler, said this about the game. He says, quote, "We never aimed to make it super hard. It was just that we kind of wanted to keep the action intense, and that was sort of the way it came out. Once you unlearn modern gaming habits and kind of get back into the game, you'll have a good time." He also goes on to say that Nintendo fans who were around back in the day would appreciate the game because, quote, "they know what Nintendo hard is," unquote. So let's talk about it a little bit. I mean, just as a philosophy, as somebody that plays video games, as somebody that talks about video games, what's your relationship with difficulty? How do you approach it? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, this is, man, I've never really thought about it until now. And it's kind of, for me personally, it's a little bit all over the place. I will say now that I found myself as a man going into my 30s with, more and more life responsibilities every day. I find myself more often than not choosing to play in like an easier mode or a normal mode, or something that doesn't quite test me to the way that I used to like to be tested when I was a younger man, as if I'm like sitting here talking like I'm 80. But I do like to default to something that's easier, because at the end of the day, after waking up early and getting beat down at work all day and coming home and having to fulfill your responsibilities at home, and you do get that time to sit down, I just don't want to beat my head against something for the couple hours I have a night to like play video games. So I will more often than not just take the path of least resistance, and because I want to feel like whether it's getting my aggression out that day or whatever it is, I just prefer that when it comes to difficulty. There are a couple notable exceptions. One, I am a noted Monster Hunter fanatic, and Monster Hunter is anything but easy. But for some reason, I find myself devouring that challenge for whatever reason. And then the only other time where I kind of embraced challenge as well was Destiny. And Destiny, when you do those raids that are very, very complex puzzles and challenges, that's something that I really, really relished. When I went into Cuphead and I first found out how difficult it was, I found that I didn't mind. I was ready to accept the challenge. And like I said, I'm not a person that normally goes out looking for challenge. It's been part of the reason why I really haven't wanted to touch anything from Software, just because I just don't want to do that. I don't have the desire to do that. But I think, like you said, we kind of grew up with that. And back in the day, games kind of had to be a little harder just so that they had lastability, because you're paying $60, $70 for a game that, you blow through it in 4 hours, and then, they had to justify the person's dollar amount that they were giving them. So a lot of games were just hard on purpose or had artificially inflated difficulties on purpose. I appreciate that Cuphead is difficult, but I don't feel like the difficulty is artificially enhanced on purpose. I think the difficulty serves the way that the entire game is, and I think that the difficulty is offset by the concessions that the game makes. For example, like, I don't remember any time where I faced a boss that it was longer than 2 minutes. Like most of my boss scores were like maybe like a minute 30, minute 45. So the boss fights are incredibly, incredibly quick when you nail down all the mechanics. And even if you do fail and you do die, like I said at the top of the episode, you're back into the action within like seconds. Like literally not more than 1 or 2 seconds go by when you're back trying that boss again. So I think the concessions that Cuphead makes to offset that difficulty make the difficulty more approachable. And I think that's what I found myself tolerating it and actually accepting it in the end, because you're able to get 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 tries at the boss within 20, 30 minutes because the sessions are that short. So that's kind of where I come down on the difficulty for this. I think the difficulty serves this game great. And there was never, even the robot level, which I profess to hate with an undying passion, there was never a point where I was like, this is too hard, I hate this.
Yeah, man, I mostly agree with you. You know, when they say, or when he said, well, we never aimed to make it super hard, that makes me raise my eyebrows a little bit. I don't believe that. I think they definitely knew what they were doing. And, you know, I'm not sure that I think there are tons of concessions with the game, but
maybe concession is the wrong word.
No, it's the right word. I know what you're saying. I think what it is that I think it is super difficult, but it is manageable. It's not unfairly difficult. You know, when I think of unfairly difficult games, you know, I think of things like unfair. That one game, Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy, I think it's called. I think that's a bad game. Just in general, I think it's not good. But that's something that's unfairly difficult, right? This is manageable. Like we've talked about so many times up to now, you get tested on your skills as you go through. It's got a good progression in that way. And it's not leaving too much up to RNG. There is a bit of that, but by and large, not enough to like really skew the difficulty. I remember what I was going to say. The notion of the boss battles being really quick. This was really welcome for me coming off of Hades, which is another tough game. But runs of that can take 30 to 40 minutes, just one run for you to not even get to the end and then die. This is so much quicker. It's like boom, boom, boom. You could get so much done in a half hour. Even if it's just one boss, you could fight him like upwards of 10, 12 times. And I appreciate that quite a bit.
Yeah, I definitely think there is a scale of difficulty where, you know, difficulty doesn't have to be something that is imposing. I think difficulty can be something that is welcoming. And like you said, Hades is a great example of that, whereas that game can be difficult, and it's a little bit different because, like you said, your runs of that game are sometimes like 20, 30, 40 minutes, and then to lose it at the end there does kind of suck. But there's other reasons that game does great things with story and they kind of keep pulling you along. The games in the same category that I think of are first of all, the aforementioned Super Meat Boy, because that game kind of does the same thing, where that game is a brutalish, hellish platforming challenge, but they get you back to the action like right away, where it's like you can take hundreds of tries at a platforming section within 30 minutes. Another game that I think really does that well and that people praise and love is Celeste 2. Celeste has some brutal platforming sections, and every time you die in that game, it responds to you like right away, and you keep trying. So I think that ability to give you the multiple tries over and over. The thing that would suck about the Nintendo Hard, the older games, is that a lot of times if you died or something, or you ran out of lives, it was, hey, guess what? You're not starting the boss over. You're starting the whole game over. Yay, you get to play the game more. Isn't that great? When no, it sucks. You just kind of wanted to see the end of the game. So I think there is that spectrum of difficulty, whereas like difficulty can serve your game very, very well if it's done in the correct way. And I think Cuphead's a pretty good example of a way to do that the right way.
And one thing too about the Nintendo games is that their difficulty was in part due to game design and level design being in its infancy.
Yes.
Whereas now the medium has grown so much so quickly that, we don't get those weird ass old school designs. We don't get things like Mega Man where things will spawn off screen and you just have to know that they're there. Mm-hmm. It's not a test of skill. It's a test of memorization. You don't get things like, is it Aladdin or is it The Lion King that's the notoriously difficult one?
The Lion King, specifically for Super Nintendo, is is, you're talking about difficulty. That game is notoriously difficult.
Yeah, that's when I hear Nintendo hard, that's where my brain goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, that combined with there not being a difficulty setting is important to note, because it gives the implication, well, not even an implication, it's essentially a fact that the developers, the designers wanted you to experience the game in this way. We talk about Hades, they give you the concession of God mode, which doesn't condescend to you. It just says, hey, every time you die, you're going to get a little stronger. I love God mode. I think it's terrific. And I side with you, Eric, based on what you said earlier. I like difficulty settings. I take no joy in, quote, getting good at video games. I don't feel like less of a man for playing something on easy. I play video games to have fun, right? To have enriching experiences. And what is not enriching to me is tappa, tappa, tappa. I'm really good at pressing buttons in the correct order. Look at how fast my thumbs are. That's not satisfying to me. And I know I sound condescending. I know. And I'm not negging anybody that enjoys that. I'm just saying that I think a lot of people don't, and the difficulty get good community that was unfortunately born out of the FromSoft community, I think it's ridiculous. Like, you're doing that in 2023, grow the hell up.
Yeah.
But Cuphead, all this to say, Cuphead does not do that. You get one fixed difficulty setting. And it sounds like, based on what I said, that I would say, like, oh, I don't like that, which isn't true. And I think it's because, and I know maybe I'm a hypocrite, maybe that's true. I mean, I contain multitudes to misappropriate the musings of somebody else. But the game lays out its progression so well that, the difficulty is there. It's tough. It's really tough. But it never, as Keaton said, and I think a couple others said, feels unfair. And that's what it comes down to. I don't care if there's a difficulty slider. I don't care if you've got a God mode. I don't care if there's none of that. I do care if you condescend to me, Metal Gear Solid. But I don't care about any of that as long as it feels fair. If it's fair but tough, cool.
And they do offer you there are little concessions in the game where you can pick the simple difficulty for the bosses to kind of like try them out and learn the patterns. They're not as difficult.
Oh my God, there's egg on my face. There is that. I completely forgot about that, man.
But the difference is that the game does not allow you to consider the boss beaten unless you beat it on the regular difficulty. So you pretty much have to play the game through the way the developers wanted you to, and that regular difficulty is kind of the tuned experience they want to. There is a simple difficulty, but if you beat the boss, it doesn't give you credit for it. And like I said, after you beat the game the first time, there is an expert difficulty if you're a sicko person. And I have played that expert difficulty. And if you like that wall, bash your head against the wall, just smashingly hard difficult, that is the mode for you by far. I think there's even an Easter egg where it's like, if you beat expert and you get S ranks on all the bosses and all the stages and stuff, you can play the game in black and white. So there are nice little things that are hidden in the game for if you want to have that that get good difficulty challenge. It's just not required as part of the main experience. The main experience is tough, but it doesn't make extreme head bashing difficulty mandatory.
Yeah, I think the reason I forgot about that simple difficulty is because, like you said, it doesn't really count it.
It doesn't really count
that way. Which, like, I know why they probably included it as like a practice kind of thing, because the bosses will have like one less phase and everything. But
yeah,
it's still tough, because then you go into the regular one, you've practiced on the simple difficulty, you're still going to encounter a final stage or phase that you didn't before. So
right,
I don't know. Like I said, I know maybe there is a hint of hypocrisy with us talking about this. Like, we like easy mode, but also Cuphead is good. But even if that's true, I don't think it takes away from. I think the scaling of this was blown way out of proportion back in 2017. There were just today alone, I read articles from GameSpot, Forbes, Polygon, Kotaku, and I watched multiple YouTube videos like from 2017 talking about the difficulty. it was really, and that's not even to mention, I'm sure Twitter was ablaze. I think that was all blown way out of proportion. I don't think it's as big of a deal as a lot of people that were upset made it out to be.
And I would agree with you too, because I think the discourse around that is interesting, especially around 2017. Like I said, you have games like Super Meat Boy and games that had established before that, hey, games can be difficult. I believe Hollow Knight was already out in 2017. That game's pretty difficult. And then not even, like you said, we've danced around it and we don't have to compare everything to Dark Souls, but we have had a string of games at this point where like difficulty is kind of the center premise. And I know there's a lot more to the Souls games that make that, like, it's just not about the difficulty, but I mean, that is the conversation around it. So yeah, for people to come out and be like, oh, well, like it's hard. And like, that's not something that is in games. It's like, that's been in games. That's been a thing now for, a while, that the difficulty is accepted, that games can be difficult as long as they're fair and they give you the tools to overcome.
Before we wrap up this discussion, one last thing. I like that Tyler Moldenhauer said, he mentioned about unlearning modern gaming habits. And you and I touched on that a little bit, like with the parry discussion. Our intuition as lowercase g gamers is to dodge. But no. You actually are rewarded for running into certain enemies and parrying them. You can't just, take cover and then shoot, take cover and then shoot. It changes, it forces you to play the game on its terms. And I think that's really cool. I think it's fresh. I don't think it's mold breaking. No. I don't think it's nothing new. Tons of games do this, but I still think it's valuable. And I think it's cool. I think they did a really good job. One from one anonymous weirdo on the internet to all the Moldenhauers. I think they did a great job.
Yeah, and I think that, just to kind of rally off your point there for a second too, unlearning modern gaming conventions, like I said, my gut instinct is to flee, especially when there's just a wall of projectiles heading towards me. My reaction is to flee, dodge, avoid at all costs. But like you said, the game gives you opportunities and teaches you that sometimes the optimal solution is to parry and be a little bit more aggressive. Sometimes the optimal solution is to play more aggressively, is to run towards that wall of projectiles to try and get the last bit of damage you need to finish off that boss. So yeah, it does give you these incredible moments where it's like, okay, my natural instincts aren't working, and I see that the game wants me to either experiment or try to break me out of my comfort zone and make me play in a way that I haven't been playing. And that's exactly what he's talking about in this game. There are several instances in this game where that all those options are viable, where dodging is viable, where being aggressive is viable, where a variety of options are viable. You have those tools and you have those options. You just have to learn them. And like you said, the game makes you play on its terms. And when you play on the game's terms, you can get pretty good and you can overcome the challenge. Yeah,
ducking is viable.
Dipping
is viable.
Yeah.
Dodging is viable.
Yeah.
Diving, ducking. What is it? Duck, dip, dive, duck, and dodge?
I think so, yeah.
Is that the 5?
You can dodge traffic, you can dodge a ball.
If you can dodge Jimmy, you can dodge the Dice King.
Right.
Man, well, I think we've tapped the well on Cuphead. I mean, it's a terrific game. At least tapped it for this format. It's a terrific game. It's visually and auditorially stunning. We didn't even talk about the sound design of like the non-music stuff. Spoiler alert! It's all very good. It's just terrific. I can't imagine somebody that's like really into games that hasn't played this yet. But if you haven't, give it a try. This episode didn't really spoil anything.
Not that there's too much to spoil.
I'm sure you can imagine who wins in the end. It's not tough to parse that out.
Yeah, classic good versus devil story. We all know how that turns out.
One thing that our listeners might not know, they might know about Cuphead. They might not know about the Unlockables. And that's what I want to talk about right now. I'm just firing on all cylinders with these segues today. And I've got to call out each and every one. but let's talk about Unlockables. Eric, you are the host of the Unlockables. You are formerly of the Side Questing Podcast, which is on indefinite hiatus, but which is how I learned of you. But you've got a current project called the Unlockables, and I wanted to give you a space to tell our listeners what that is and where they could find you.
Well, I'll tell you what you won't find on the Unlockables is such masterful transitions. I'm learning from the master transition, so I'm hoping I can take a bit of that and incorporate it into my show for sure. But the Unlockables is a show that I built as the story of video games, the people who play them, and the memories made along the way. And, you know, really what I try to do with that show is just kind of invite creators, people that have podcasts, people that play video games on the show, and just kind of talk about what it is they do on the internet and their experience and memories with video games. And Rick here has come on. I interviewed him about Pixelprojectradio, and he's also come on for my absolutely insane 12 games of Christmas thing that I did around Christmas time. And lately I've been diving into more about sharing more about the games that I love and that I grew up with. Like you said, I have a long running at this point, a series on Kingdom Hearts called Guiding Keys, the story of Kingdom Hearts, where I try to profile Tetsuya Nomura like a serial killer and get inside his mind and figure out what he was telling us in the story of Kingdom Hearts. So that's been an incredibly rewarding experience to go back and play games that mean so much to me. And yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing. And I'll put out episodes on whatever I feel like talking about, because it's my show and I do it alone and I'm not beholden to anybody, which feels great. So yeah, you can find me at the Unlockables Podcast anywhere that podcasts are found, any podcatcher. If you want to interact with me online, you can go to linktr.ee/unlockables, and there is all my social media links where you can get in touch with me, Instagram, all that stuff. You can join the one of many of our Discord servers that we have amongst all of us podcasting friends, and just hang out with us and have a grand old time and laugh about games and share memes and, you know, unpopular opinions and all that great stuff. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me. If it sounds interesting, just, you know, tweet at me, listen to the show, say hi, and let me know what you like or didn't like about it.
And you can find that Linktree link in the episode description. I will make sure to put it in there, so look for that, and you can find all of Eric's stuff. It's a really interesting and unique blend of interviews of other podcasters and, as you said, coverage on games that you enjoy. Not beholden to any sort of current release schedule or things like that. But one thing that I wanted to ask you that I like to ask all of the guests that come on is, do you have a recommendation for an episode for new listeners to start with?
Ooh.
It's something that encapsulates the essence of the Unlockables.
Yeah, I guess if you really wanted to jump into the madness right away, I would recommend probably the first episode of Guiding Keys, where I talk about Kingdom Hearts 1 or Start 2. That's been kind of like my focus, my mini-series as of late, so that you'll get to know me real well, as I'm basically at this point the kind of high priest of Tetsuya Nomura, so that's a good one to jump into. The interview I did with Rick early on, he was one of the first guests I ever had on the project. When I came to him and I was like, Rick, I'm starting a new project, I want you to be on it. He graciously agreed to appear, and that's a fantastic talk. So that's a good one too. And really, any of the earlier interviews with any of our podcasting buddies, there are some really great ones. There are some really awesome talks, and one of the cool things about the show that I never expected is people share such great and such touching memories about their memories around video games, and I never expected that at all. And it just kind of reinforces my belief that games are more than just, you know, a thing to be consumed. They are memories, they are comfort, and that's really what I try to triumph in my show. So yeah, any one of those interview ones, the Kingdom Hearts episode, if you want like just a bunch of rapid fire ones in a row, the 12 Games of Christmas was just 12 episodes with people on talking about the games from last year, so that's a good starting place too. Yeah, any of those is really great. Yeah.
Yeah, the 12 Days of Christmas, which were 12 consecutive episodes, just all in a row.
It's madness.
Are really great. The one that we did was on Shredder's Revenge, TMNT.
Absolutely.
It was a blast. It turned out really well.
Mm-hmm.
And your newest episode, this might not be the actual newest, but the newest that I've listened to was the Advanced Wars one, about the recent reboot camp.
Oh, yes.
In which you do a bit more of a journalistic style in it, and it's really nice. It was a really, really cool and polished end product. I liked it a lot.
That one was specifically inspired. I gotta say, I was inspired by you because you did such that fantastic like scripted episode on Final Fantasy X-2, and just hearing that, one of my, if I can just gush a little bit, I'm in the presence of the master. One of my favorite podcasting episodes of all time. So I was like, That's really cool. I'd like to try my hand at that. And there's no easy feat to write something that you can sustain for 30, 40, 50 minutes. So I figured starting shorter would be a good place to start. And I only have, like I said, I took inspiration from you for that one for sure.
Well, first of all,
sorry to make you uncomfortable on your show.
No, flattery gets you everywhere. So there's that. But no, thank you very much. I take a lot of pride in that episode in particular.
It's very good.
So thank you. I really appreciate that. And you should take pride in everything that you've done, because it's seeing it evolve from SideQuest, the SideQuesting podcasts, which, I mean, it's got a lot of the same DNA, but it was a different show. Mm-hmm. Seeing it evolve into Unlockables, seeing Unlockables evolve from the early days of sometimes you would interview, sometimes it felt, I'm not saying it was off the cuff, but sometimes it felt off the cuff, like you addressed the war in Ukraine at one point, which was it felt more like just a talk with a good friend rather than just listening to a podcast, that kind of thing. To see it evolve into what it's become, this intense retrospective on a particular game that's got notoriously confusing lore, and into these more these episodes that are smaller and tighter and more polished, what do you call it, audio wise and editing wise. It's been really cool to see. And Unlockables is one of the few shows that I listen to all the time. I don't listen to any show consistently day and date because I'm human, but Unlockables is consistently in my rotation. So I think all of you should check it out. And we've got some other plugs to do. I've got to plug my own stuff here. Much like Eric, we've got a Twitter, we've got a Discord, we've got an Instagram. You can find Eric's stuff in the link tree. You can find our stuff right below Eric's stuff in the episode description. That was a clunky explanation, but you know what I mean. Open up, click see more, see episode notes. You'll see it all. You'll see Eric's link tree. You'll see our stuff. Both of our Discords are popping. We're both active on Twitter. We're both active on Instagram. You can come and hang out with all of us there. Eric, do you have a Patreon?
Oh, well, yeah, I do at patreon.com/.
I'm part of the Patreon. I forgot that I'm part of your Patreon. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I always forget to shill it because, like I said, it's a newer thing. So, yeah, if you like what you hear and you're under no obligation to support to the show. I put it out there because I love doing what I do, and all the great stuff. My best work I still put on the main feed, and I make for free, available for everyone. But if you want to hear a little bit more of just mad ramblings about just kind of random stuff, I use the Patreon for that. I have some monologues. I have some shorter game reviews about the stuff that I play, more traditional game reviews. My craziest idea is I'm doing an entire Pokemon anime rewatch series, which is probably 1,000+ episodes at this point. So, yeah, that should be fun. And then I just have other random, just kind of VIP episodes that wouldn't really fit the normal format of the show, but I just put them out there if you guys are interested in hearing more of me. So, yeah.
Yeah, I forgot because I don't like the Patreon app. I don't use it very much.
Yeah.
But I'm a patron to Eric's show, as he is to mine. So I think that you should consider doing both. I've said in the past that it's just cool to support artists doing their thing, which I still believe is true. Somebody recently said, they look at, and I swear to God, this is a real quote. I'm not just making this up. They said in a Discord, they're like, yeah, I just kind of think of it as once a month I'm buying them a coffee. Again, I did not make that up. Somebody else said it. But
that's nice.
Yeah, right. That's how I think of it. So you can find all of those links for Eric's socials, for our socials, for the Patreons in the description. And no new review. If you want to give us a review and want it read on air, you can do that on Apple Podcasts or Podcast Addict. Those are the ones that'll let you write, but we like Spotify reviews too. We just can't read them because there's nothing to read. And they're anonymous. So, all that being said, I think it's time to wrap Cuphead up and say goodbye. It's been a swell bout. Eric, thank you for joining me on this really cool game.
No problem, Rick. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me on once again. And I, as always, inevitably look forward to the next collaboration between us. It's always a great time.
Here, my friend. All right, everyone, you know me. I'm not Mugman. I'm not Cuphead. I'm not A mug cup. God, I got to work on my outros. Rick has to work on his outros. That's me. And until next time, I'm signing off. We'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.